Welcome back to the Ironbird Podcast. Today's guest is Amanda Piper, a corporate flight attendant, airfax instructor, and former head of cabin with a powerful perspective on what safety really looks like in the back of an airplane. We talk about how fax training changes the level of safety a flight attendant can bring to a flight, and how Amanda uses her procedures, preparation, and presence to elevate the in-cabin experience. She also shares her career journey, how in just 7 years she's built a reputation through her drive to learn more, do more, and lead from the front. This one's for anyone who really cares about what really makes a great cabin crew member and how the role goes far beyond service. I look forward to having you listen. So yeah, tell me about how, like, what first, how'd you get interested in aviation? How'd you get started? And I know we were chatting about the training, like where does that come from?
Yeah. So it was actually pretty random for me. I mean, I grew up traveling a lot. My dad was a serial entrepreneur, so he would open different branches of his companies in different countries, and we would get to go with him sometimes and
That's
all
fun.
of that. Yeah. So in 2002, he sold his company to SAS, which is a company in North Carolina.
Mm-hmm. And
as part of the move out there, we got to ride on the Citation 10.
Nice.
Yeah. So I was like 11 years old, and I was like, Portland to Raleigh-Durham in 4.5 hours.
Yeah.
This is pretty sweet.
Yeah.
I like this.
Yeah.
And I remember my dad, that became a goal of his. He's like, I'm going to get a private jet someday. So I was aware of private aviation, but that kind of just went to the back.
It's a goal for me, but Pilates is what I'm going for.
Nice. You know, have you seen the new Global 8000?
Yeah,
I'm just
right?
setting my sights all the way up there.
I
Like,
know.
let's just go for that. Anyways, so then I went to business school. I went to the University of Washington, did operations and supply chain management, and started working at Microsoft out of college, and kind of stayed in the corporate world for about 7 years, doing mostly data analytics and marketing, and reached a point where I was just kind of sad all the time.
Yeah.
I was like, I want to travel, which is not what you're supposed to say in an interview, but I'll be honest. A lot of it was I want to travel. I'm tired of being cooped up in an office all day, having these PTO days that I never actually get to use, and I want to have a job that has some autonomy and creativity and freedom. Weirdly enough, I'm at my acting school's Christmas party in 2018. I'm just chatting with one of my classmates, and he's like, "Man, you sound a lot like my wife. She's a private jet flight attendant." And I said, "That's a thing?" Because keep in mind, we flew on the Citation 10. There was no flight attendant on that plane, so I didn't even know this was a thing. So I got really intrigued. And at that point, I went home, I did a lot of research, and I made a pros and cons list, which I still have.
Such a data analytics way to do it.
Of course, yeah. I couldn't just make a decision. I was like, pros, cons, let me throw it into a spreadsheet, like run some analysis on it. And I remember I called up my dad, and I was like, I'm going to go be a private jet flight attendant. And he was like, you're what? He was like, you have a business degree, you worked at Microsoft, you know what I mean? You're throwing your life away. I was like, I've heard this before. It's all right. I was like, no, but I think this is actually what I want to do. So I did some research. I ended up going initially to a program down in South Florida called VVIP.
Okay.
They had great marketing, and the program was good, you know. Definitely gave me a good introduction, and ultimately I got my first job as a result of them. So I'm eternally grateful to them. But getting out of the training, I quickly realized most companies wanted you to have fax or flight safety.
This episode is brought to you by Charter Flight Support, the only coverage in private aviation that protects you when an aircraft mechanical issue stops your aircraft from flying. CFS not only provides financial support if the replacement aircraft costs more, they also help locate and book quality backup aircraft fast. Learn more at charterflightsupport.com, and don't forget to sign up for their newsletter, The Fix, for real-time insights on private jet trends, aircraft types, and rates. This episode is brought to you by Video Valet. If you care about having the best in-flight experience on your private flights, Video Valet offers up to 1.2 million movies, shows, magazines, and newspapers, all available on board without the need of expensive Wi-Fi or hardware. Eric and his team at Video Valet deliver fully customized iPads to ensure that your preferences are met on every single flight. Whether providing my kids with their favorite shows or allowing me and my wife to catch up on breaking news, I personally could never travel without it again. Video Valet is offering a special promotion to Ironbird Podcast listeners. Mention Ironbird, and Video Valet will add one free fully personalized iPad at no additional cost. Now to the Ironbird Podcast. Interesting.
So that was like, I got to go to fax now.
Yeah.
So I went to fax. Now I'm like $8,000 in the hole. I had about 2 months of savings before I had to just take a job. And that 2 months was up because it takes a while sometimes to find a job. I ended up taking an executive assistant job at the Hollywood Reporter and, did that for 6 months. And again, I was miserable. And my dad, bless him, was like, whatever happened to that flight attendant thing you were doing?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And I was like, I kind of gave up, Dad.
Yeah.
He was like, you don't give up. He's like, keep trying. Just keep trying. So sure enough, I went back. I opened up my email, my flight attendant email that I'd created, which is my flight attendant email to this day, jetwithamanda@gmail.com.
It's a good name.
Thank you. Yeah, I was like, I needed something that was like Fly with Amanda was already taken. So Jet with Amanda is what we ended up with. And there was an email there from the head of VVIP. And she said, this company is interviewing and they want to talk to you. And that was from 10 days earlier. Mm-hmm. So I immediately called her. I was like, I'm so sorry, I missed this. Are they still hiring? She says, let me check. Anyways, fast forward, I interviewed from the parking lot of the Hollywood Reporter on my lunch break. 4 days later, I was in Fort Lauderdale for training and kind of started from there.
What was your experience from, your first experience on a Citation 10 versus maybe your first experience actually like working on an airplane?
Yeah. My first plane, I was on a Challenger 601. So the company, they had 5 601s.
Oh, that's right. I was looking at your LinkedIn. It was Paragon, right?
Oh, yes, it was.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Who's no longer
They're no longer in business. And funny enough, that's a whole other story of I perfectly timed my exit 3 days before they went out of business.
Oh, there you go. Were you able to collect a last paycheck?
I did get my last paycheck, because I had exited the month before they went out. So everyone was like, Amanda, how did you get out so well? And I was like, the writing was on the wall in certain ways. Sometimes you got to look, not listen. And,
But there was probably a good kind of crash course to.
That's exactly what it was.
To 135, like ASAPs, pop-ups.
AOGs, maintenance, repo, get off this plane, go to that plane. Yeah. Pilot dynamics, all sorts of things. Like those first 6 months that I was there, I probably learned more than I did in like the next 2 years, to be honest. Yeah. So it actually sculpted my belief in what I tell people now is when they're first getting started, I was like, go work for a 135 operator. Yeah. Because you're going to get the most experience that way. You get to work with a bunch of different crews. You get to see all sorts of different passengers, different routings, different ways you have to be flexible and adaptable.
Different airplanes.
Yeah. Destinations. It's really, I think, the best training. It just throws you in. So even though it was a little bit of a, what it was, I learned so much.
Like, what are those first days like of being, like, was there any training that outside of, you had the VVIP training, right? And then going to a 135 operator, what was the 135 training like?
Yeah, so they did, I think it was like a 2 or 4 day NDOC. I can't remember exactly. And it was just me, which was cool because I was the only person starting at that time. I think they had about 10 full-time cabin attendants. So their lead cabin attendant kind of walked me through the training, and she did a great job too. And she's at FlexJet now. And, yeah. But so that was good. So I did get a little bit more hands-on in terms of what I'm actually going to be doing. She took me to the grocery store and was like, here's how we stock for the flight. And she took me to the plane. So I got a little bit more, but I remember my very first flight. Because my biggest concern was, and a lot of flight attendants say this, well, what if I have to make a bed? I don't know why it's so scary. We know how to make beds on the ground, right? But for some reason, making a bed is so scary for flight attendants. And it was like, no, you'll fly a few flights. That won't happen. My first flight, not only did I have to make a bed, the couple on board was actively getting a divorce, as the flight was happening. So the tension was just so intense. I offered them beverages. We're still on the ground. He wanted, just an espresso. Nespresso machine doesn't work. The outlets are out. So I took the Nespresso machine inside the FBO. Mind you, they don't notice because they're just arguing. Yeah. I made the coffee inside, brought it back out to the plane. They were none the wiser. And then we got airborne and, closed the curtain and they took a nap and that was it. So they didn't know. But yeah, that first flight was kind of like broken this, backs are fighting. You have to make a bed. It's like, welcome to the Wild West.
What is it about making beds that people are concerned about?
It's challenging because...
How is making a bed on a private airplane different than at home?
Well, for the one part, when you're making it at home, generally, unless your bed is pressed up against the wall, you have space to walk around and tuck. With these, you're having to push the sheets into the corners of the divan. Yep. So there's just possibilities of it not looking as clean and as nice. The bigger problem, though, is most charter companies don't really have the mattresses or the bedding in order to make a bed properly or comfortable. You know, I've been on ones with the Euler mattresses and Prima Donna, and then it's great because it folds out perfectly. The mattress is like custom cut for that. The sheets are cut. I mean, even so much where it's pleated in the corners. So it, like the fitted sheet really fits it. But a lot of the times on these charter ones, like you're turning around a G4 seat and putting it down, and then the seat's like this, and you're getting an REI camper pad, and you're taking a top sheet to make a fitted sheet, and you only have one full-size pillow, and so you got to get a pillowcase, and
I've had times where I had to send the crew to Target.
Oh, many times.
Because they they want, and sometimes the bedding can take up a lot of space in certain situations. So a lot of they don't carry it. So a lot of people don't carry it. So I'm calling the crew, hey, you know, these guys want a bed. I know it's during the day, but they're going to be doing their business meetings all night and they want to sleep. And they're like, we don't have the bedding.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, well, now what? It's like, all right, we go to Target or.
I've done many Target runs for that exact reason.
Yep.
And on the flip side, some people get so nervous about not having bedding that they start hoarding the bedding. But the problem is, I mean, you've seen the cargo on these planes. Like the space is so small that you have all that bedding back there. There's not enough room for the suitcases now. So I had a call one time from a girl, and it was on a training flight. And she's just fuming from Vegas. She just hopped on this plane. She was like, Amanda, I kid you not, there are 13 mattresses back here. And I was like, offload them. So then I got someone from in-flight we got a quote, and it was going to be $6,500 just to ship these mattresses back. I was asked the intern in flight, I was like, hey, tomorrow, can you drive to Vegas?
Yeah, rent a car.
Yep, and come back and bring the mattresses back. And, you know, now it's like $100 in gas.
Yeah.
So I gotta get creative sometimes.
How was your view of just like the job? You know, what was your view of this job when you first started versus like how has it changed over time to what you feel like is maybe what's important to you now that, hey, when I first started, I thought it was all luxury and that's what was the most important. How has your view changed to what, you know, now that you have kind of more experience?
Yeah, I think it's evolved in like different ways. Service has always been there. Like that's always been my understanding of it, is this is a service role. But the more that I've been in it, the more, and especially now that I teach safety, the more that like safety has come to the forefront and the importance of that and being able to juggle and balance both, because it's not an either or, like it should be a both thing. And I also think that there's always more to learn. You know, so where in the beginning I kind of describe it as, you know, you're doing a painting, you're just trying to get like the broad strokes, right? Like just get some paint on the painting, on the canvas.
Get them to buckle on takeoff and landing.
Make sure you're in your seat before the plane lands, you know, sterile cockpit, don't talk to the pilots, you know, until you get to 10,000 feet, right? Basics. And then there's always more refinement that comes in. Oh, I can put a little more color here. I can do a little more this there. So there's always more refinement that can happen. And I think just being open to learning with every flight. And I do. At the end of every flight, I always assess like, hey, what went really well? What was an opportunity that I may have missed? What's something that I want to take into my next flight? And just having that mindset of like continuous improvement, I think is super important.
How do you balance the service and the luxury, but like not forgetting about the safety?
Yeah. You just have to work it into your flow. So, I mean, for me, it's pretty standard. Like I get on board the plane and the first thing that I do, sometimes even before the lights come on, before the APU is running, I just get my phone out with my flashlight and I get my safety briefing card and I pre-flight my emergency equipment. You know, so I literally walk the length of the plane, down the left side to the back, up the right side, and every single piece of equipment that's listed, I'm making sure that it's there, secure, and operational. That it's not expired, that it's where it's supposed to be, that a bracket isn't missing from the wall. Because I know now teaching safety that most accidents are unplanned and most are happening on landing followed by takeoff. Your best defense in that case is knowing your emergency equipment. Because while we say when you're on the ground, you don't fight the fire, you run away. What if you need to fight the fire to get to the emergency exit? I don't want to spend any time thinking about where my fire extinguisher is. So
what's typically on that checklist that you're going through? What's that look like?
Yeah, so every plane's going to have, you know, the basics of life vest, fire extinguishers, hopefully an AED, but not always. Hopefully a telemedicine provider kit, but not always. Some kind of supplemental oxygen, so whether that's a portable oxygen bottle or therapeutic oxygen or both. Some planes, this is really nice, have the smoke hoods for passengers, which if you are a Part 91 or even if you're a 135, They cost like $65
Yep.
each. You can get a bulk order, and having them at the seat, if there is smoke on board, just being able to quickly don that filtration smoke hood is going to like be so much more comfortable for the passengers.
Yep.
So anyways, that's something that I would
Is that
recommend
something
people get.
new? Because I've never even heard of that
It's
before.
not even new.
Really?
It's just, there is a certain level of cost evaluation, I think, that goes into it of,
Yeah.
oh, well, how likely is it that this is going to happen?
Yeah.
We see the same thing with, there's this product called Firebane, where if you have a lithium battery fire, for example, it quickly cools, and it can cool metals that are over, thousands of degrees.
wow.
And it's like $450 for the kit.
Yeah.
I'm like, I've spent more on a fruit tray.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So just those basic things, like having those smoke hoods for all of the passengers, having that Firebane, having some don't even have the fire containment bag, the fire sock. But what happens if the laptop overheats? What happens if someone's cell phone overheats?
Yeah.
You want to have a containment bag for those. So
Wow. That's really interesting. I don't think I've ever even like heard of half of this stuff. It's like,
Yeah.
what do you think are some of those other things that you would put together as like on any airplane, if someone's serious about safety, these are the things that maybe you should have that maybe sometimes you don't see on airplanes.
yeah, from a flight attendant perspective, because I think some of it is on our end to come into it prepared as well. Something that I always carry is my emergency evacuations checklist.
Yep.
Because I always tell people in training, like, we're a checklist industry.
Yep.
There's no bonus points for memorizing the checklist. I mean, it doesn't matter how long pilots have been flying, they still do starting engines checklist, right? So having that checklist in my flight attendant drawer right next to my mini roll of duct tape.
Yep.
Because if ever there was a planned emergency where I had time to prepare the cabin, I want to be securing my cabinets. People are like, does that duct tape really work? Let me tell you. Flown on many a plane where even in perfectly good working order, the drawers pop open.
Yep.
You
Yeah.
ask anyone who's been flying, I'll be like, hey, you guys ever have drawers pop open on landing?
Yep.
Universally, all hands go up, right?
Yep.
So I had a G4 one time, this trash bin just kept coming open. And, it's right there in the back,
Yeah.
and the passengers are sitting right there. I got this tiny little piece of Gorilla Tape and put it on there, stayed shut.
Yeah.
So you can imagine if I was taping those cabinets shut, it's likely it's going to stay closed. And especially for planes with the forward galley, where that's now blocking your primary exit,
Yeah.
taking the time to secure that is really key.
Because I would assume passengers that see like the cabinets that aren't working, they start to question like, hey,
Yeah. They start worrying or like, am I on an old airplane?
why is the maintenance guy's not looking at that? Like,
That's
what
right.
else? And then there's
Yeah.
like, what else? Well, what else are they starting to not
Yeah.
look at? And that's really interesting.
Yeah. To
So
be
the
fair,
small-
I mean, just a word to the wise for anyone opening those latches, you do have to just let them down gently. People go clack and they just let them go. The more you let them go, the quicker they
just
break.
wear out.
So you just
Yeah.
have to very gently move like a ballerina through the cabin in the galley. So that's from the flight attendant perspective, right? From the operator perspective, those things beyond which are just
Yeah.
minimum, right? So those smoke hoods at every seat is great. AED, right? Because ideally you have a flight attendant on board who's trained.
Can you explain what an AED is?
Yes, the automatic external defibrillator. So it's when someone is having a cardiac event, and you need to begin doing CPR.
Yep.
It's what's going to be put on, here, and it's looking for a shockable rhythm. So if it finds a shockable rhythm, it resuscitates them. They come back, yay, that's the goal.
Yeah.
But if you don't have that, you're doing CPR the whole time.
Yeah.
And if you stop CPR,
Yeah.
there's
nothing.
they stay dead basically. So you
Yeah.
have to continue the CPR the whole way down. Sometimes you can't get down so quickly.
Yeah.
What happens if you're flying over water?
Yeah.
I like that a lot of the places I contract with now have a really big focus on safety, because they'll say, like, Part 91 accounts, they're like, hey, the owner's mom is on board and she's 90. So it's really important for us that you know how to do CPR, you know how to operate the AED,
Yeah.
you know, like, the contents of the med kit, how to use it. So I think that being really skilled in like the medical side of things is
Yeah.
super important as well.
Where do you get that type of training?
Facts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in fax training, what's the overarching kind of like the breakdown? There's probably an academic word to it, but the outline of what you're going to get in a fax training.
Yeah.
The curriculum. What's the fax curriculum?
Sure, of course. So we have the 3-day initial program and then the 2-day recurrent program.
Yep.
So basically the initial program starts on a Tuesday and goes Wednesday, Thursday, and then the recurrent program goes Wednesday, Thursday.
Yep.
And we're preparing you for all different types of emergencies.
Yep.
So whether that's medical, fire, decompression, emergency evacuations, ditchings, a lot of it is oriented around emergency response.
Yep.
A lot of it is oriented also around CRM. That's a big piece. We spend a lot of time on crew briefings, passenger briefings, crew dynamics.
Can you explain what CRM is?
CRM, crew resource management. So to sum it up in a word, I mean, it's a lot, but it's good communication. There's 7 components of CRM. It started back in the 70s when they were observing, hey, there's a lot more plane crashes happening than there should be. And they found through a NASA study, actually, that it was from pilot error, not plane problems.
Yeah.
So CRM actually started originally as cockpit resource management. And then they realized, oh, it's not just communication between pilots, it's actually the whole crew. So then they brought the whole crew in, flight attendants as well. And now CRM is required for most like Part 135, Part 125, Part 121 that people go through training on CRM.
Yeah. So to go back to the curriculum of fax. So if someone going into fax, like what are they going to leave fax with?
My objective is that people leave feeling like I can do something about it. That's kind of how I sum it up.
Yeah.
I don't ever want someone in a position where they feel disempowered, where they feel like a victim, where they feel like I don't know what to do here.
Yeah.
And a lot of what's being pushed, not intentionally, but maybe just out of neglect, is that if there is a problem, the pilots will handle it.
Yeah.
In fact, after the accident in 2005 in Teterboro, where the plane went off the runway and crashed into the wall, you've seen that one?
Yep.
They issued that SAFO in 2008, and I always focus on that section during initial to show the cabin attendants, because that was 17 years ago, and not much has really changed.
Yeah.
Where they say a flight attendant isn't necessarily required for Part 135 flights. So in the event that there is no flight attendant on board, meaning not you, even though you're standing right there, and the passengers think you're a flight attendant, but you're just a cabin aide, cabin host, cabin server, passenger service representative, stewardess, flight waitress, whatever they call you, right? That the pilots are supposed to make it perfectly clear in their required pre-flight briefings, which I'll take issue with a couple of those things. They're not always perfectly clear, and they don't always do those required pre-flight briefings.
Yep.
That all safety-related functions will be accomplished by the pilots themselves.
Yeah.
How are they going to do that if they're flying the plane? Right?
Seems kind of difficult, right?
Exactly. So there's just so many holes in that explanation that I feel like, okay, yes, I'm hopeful that we will get some updates from the FAA that requires, my ultimate goal is that flight attendants are required on Part 135.
Yep.
But short of that, we don't need to sit around and wait for that to happen.
Yeah.
We can prepare ourselves, equip ourselves, and that starts with going to training so that you can walk into any flight knowing that if there was a fire today, if someone had some kind of medical event, if we had a depressurization, if we did have an aborted takeoff, I would know exactly what to do, and I would feel confident that I could do something about it.
Well, I think in the recent news, unfortunately, you've seen more issues and more incidents. And I think even on the Delta flight that flipped over, and you were seeing, the flight attendant there performing their safety duties, how important that is. And I know there's when I was working for 135, they struggled back and forth of, do we want to label this person an official crew member, right? And that's the whole idea of, for people that don't know, sometimes you can be labeled as a cabin server and you're basically a passenger. Yeah. And the reason for that is now you don't have to be under crew duty rules because there may be a flight that goes, they're swapping crew members.
I've been on many of those flights.
And then they don't swap the flight attendant. Yeah. And they can legally do that because you're not a legal crew member.
Which is wild because we're on our feet the entire time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's where I look at, okay, this needs to change.
Yeah.
And I think that we're heading in that direction because ultimately it's better for the passengers also if we're treated like humans that need sleep and all of that, especially given the fact that we are operating on our feet, serving people for, sometimes 10, 12 hours at a time.
And then you're asked to potentially perform safety duties.
Of course.
after, on your 12th hour, which probably isn't the easiest thing to do.
Yeah, I would imagine it wouldn't be.
So. How did you get into, becoming a FACS, is it FACS certified instructor?
Certified. So this is actually pretty good. So, because there's a little bit of nomenclature that gets a little confused in the industry. So there is no certification for Part 135 for flight attendants.
Okay.
We can be FACS trained, flight safety trained,
okay.
right? So we issue you a certificate, but it's not the same as a certification.
Got it.
Yeah. So what we're doing is we're putting you through the FACS training, and then you get your cabin safety certificate, which you then give to the operators you fly with, and they say, yes, this is great. Now, because we're not actually flight attendants, technically, the companies don't need those, but they do need them if they're trying to get the shiny seal on the website from Argus, Wyvern, Isbeo, right? So it's not actually coming from the FAA level that we're training cabin attendants, flight attendants. It's more from the companies, and they'll say, okay, you want to work here, you need to have your FACS or flight safety training current every 12 months. And that's why people will go. But then there's operators that they don't care.
Yeah.
So people don't go to safety training. And to those people, I say, okay, maybe the company doesn't require it, but do you want to be in a situation where something happens on board? And it's great, take care of the passengers, save them, but save yourself too.
Yeah.
Like, you have people at home that love you and want you to come back. And I want you to be able to do something about that so that you can make it home to your loved ones. And if you save the passengers along the way, that's awesome.
Yeah.
But know what you're doing, right?
Well, when I was talking to Jamie about the incident in Naples, she told me about the training where when you're on descent and there's potentially an issue, you leave the jump seat and move into the cabin.
That's right.
And it's just some of those things, those small things, you can only get with training.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, I have an entire slide. I spend a lot of time talking about that, of why that L1 seat is the best seat.
Yeah.
Because the first thing that you're doing before you're opening any emergency exit is assess the outside conditions.
Yeah.
Well, if I'm sitting right here, I can quickly look out that window and have a clear line of sight to my main cabin door egress.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's step number one. Two, we want to be in aft facing seats. Those are the most secure, just from a physics perspective. We have more, we're not collapsing forward. We have a full view of the cabin. So we can still command and control the cabin without having to crane our necks and turn around all this way. We're also closest to the cockpit. So we can hear instructions from the pilots. We can turn right there. I'm also at kind of like a halfway point between my overwing exit and my main cabin door. So for a number of reasons, that's what we train people. And when we do these planned evacuations, part of it is reseating the passengers. That's actually one of the steps.
Really?
Yeah. So, the first thing is you get the information from the pilots. You go back and you let the passengers know what's going on. And then I have to select my ABPs, my able-bodied passengers. Those are the people that are going to assist me in the evacuation if for some reason I need help, or if I can't do it myself because something's happened to me.
Yep.
From there, I reseat all of my passengers. I get them into aft-facing seats first, forward-facing seats next. Last option, divan. Bodies do well this way. They do okay this way. They don't do so great this way at high speeds. Then I have them put their seatbelts on. I teach them their brace positions, and then I begin readying the cabin. So there's a whole series of steps that we go through, and part of that is taking that L1 seat for yourself.
Wow, that's intense.
Yeah.
How has your view of safety changed now that you've become an instructor versus when you were first just flying as a flight attendant?
Yeah, it's definitely deepened it, because with every class that I teach, people are coming in with different experience, and they're saying, well, what about this? What about that? Or this happened to me while I was on board, and I handled it this way. What should I have done? And I've actually started taking elements of that into my own flights, like things I was maybe not as strict about before. Now I just do it all the time. For example, we like to know in an emergency evacuation what we're listening for from the cockpit. Are they going to say easy Victor or evacuate? That's basically the code to be like, start the evacuation.
Yeah.
I want to know. So I'll start asking the pilots, hey guys, in the event that we had an evacuation today, are we team easy Victor or team evacuate? And I've literally had it where the PIC says one thing and the SIC says another, and they look at each other and they go, we should probably figure this out.
Yeah.
Good CRM,
Yeah.
Good communication, getting us all on the same page, right? Another thing is I look even more in depth in my pre-flight check. There was a plane I'd been flying on for 5 years off and on. And just recently, a couple months ago, I went through and I realized that the placarded location of the fire extinguisher was not where the fire extinguisher was on board. It showed that it was on the forward side of the Zone 3 bulkhead, but really it was on the back side of the Zone 4 bulkhead. It was like slightly off.
You knew where it was, so in your mind you were like didn't have to confirm that.
But what
right?
happens if a passenger's sitting there and they're looking at it and something happened to me and they need to get to a fire extinguisher and it's not there?
Another flight attendant comes on. You're sick that day. You have another flight attendant, right?
Yeah.
That's interesting. What are some of the most important things that you think are maybe sometimes overlooked when it comes to safety training and then safety in the cabin?
Yeah. The biggest thing that I hear people say when they come through training, because we spend the entire day on Thursday doing drills out on the sim. And I come up with all different scenarios and each student gets their own sim and you don't know what it's going to be.
Yeah, what's that like?
Oh my gosh, it's so much fun. And they all end up having fun because I like to make it really interactive where the students now get to be the passengers. And I say like, just for this exercise, you're being the passengers and behave like passengers would behave.
So are you in like a fake cabin? What's that? What's that like?
Yeah. So it's basically a full simulator with hydraulics and smoke and lights. And it's kind of like a G4 interior, but then we have all of the windows. So we have like, a Falcon window, we have a Bombardier window, we have the old Gulfstream windows, the new Gulfstream windows, and they practice opening all of those exits, going out those exits, getting the passengers off through the exits. So they have it
set up where like they can do smoke inside and everything.
Yeah.
Really, I've never seen it. It'd be really interesting to see what it looks like.
Yeah, come on out to Van Nuys. I'll show it to you. Yeah. So I do different sims for everyone, and they don't know what it's going to be. And the hardest one is when you have to do the full checklist for an emergency evacuation, and usually with the ditching, because with the ditching, not only do you have to do all of those steps, but you also have to brief your ABP on the operation of the life raft, which takes a lot of time because there's a lot of steps for that. And people fall apart a little bit sometimes. And we have ways that we can overcome that falling apartness, and I help people with that. But the thing I hear people say the most is, oh, well, if it was the real thing, I would rise to the occasion. And I'm like, no.
That's what the training's for,
That's what the training's for. Pro athletes do not say, hey, tomorrow in the big game, I'll really give it 100%. No, they train at like 120% so that tomorrow they can fall to 100%. Same thing with, a ballerina. She's not, like kicking her leg up being like, oh, but tomorrow I'll really kick it all the way up. It's like, no, you need to go as far as you can so that in the real thing, when it's louder and scarier and you have real people and real terror, you've already done it once, twice, a dozen times every year you come. You don't think about it. It just goes.
Yeah. That's really interesting. Yeah. What's something you think that operators and aircraft owners, don't understand about, some important parts of safety?
Yeah. The biggest thing is that they don't think that safety is part of our role.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the biggest misconception, because we are in the cabin with the passengers. We're the first line of sight.
Yeah.
And there may be a scenario where the SIC can hop up and help, but most of the times in these emergencies, they're trying to get the plane on the ground.
Yeah.
So it's just good business to have someone in the cabin with your passengers who knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
So really making sure that if they don't have some kind of internal safety training in place, or if they don't require FACS or flight safety, that they're at a minimum incorporating some of that into their in-doc. But really, I think it needs to be kind of at the FAA level that, hey, every 12 months, the same way that we do pilots, you need to go to an approved training school to do your safety training, because it's just better that way.
Going into CRM a little bit more, in your experience of leading teams, what's been, the some of the things you've taken away that can build a positive, organizational safety culture around teams?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing with crew dynamics is, it all starts with communication, but part of communication is knowing how to actually have an effective communication cycle.
Yeah.
And that doesn't always mean talking. A lot of the time, it's just listening and giving a really good acknowledgement.
Yeah.
So we have to understand that, people have lives. Who knows, on that flight day, your pilot shows up and he's really grumpy.
Yeah.
And I try to give people grace and understanding of, maybe he got in a fight with his wife.
Yeah.
Maybe the market just tanked and he lost a lot of money. I don't know, right? So I don't go into that thinking oh, well, Bob's grumpy today. I'm not going to talk to him. I'm not going to talk to him. Yeah. That's horrible, And it may come a point where he vents to me a little bit. And maybe he says some things that are a little colorful or whatever. I don't create antagonism. I just listen. I acknowledge. I hear you. I got that.
Yep.
I totally understand. And then that diffuses the situation. I used to coach people on that a lot because I would get calls, Amanda, blah, 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 the pilot, blah, 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 blah. And I'd be like, hold on one second. I got someone on the other line. Hey, this is the pilot. Oh, the flight attendant, blah, 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 blah. And, I'm in the middle, between these adults. And I'd ask them, how did it go? Did you guys talk to each other about it? Well, no, I can't talk to her about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Work it out. Call me back when you've talked to each other. And then they normally don't call me back.
Yeah.
Sometimes just having those conversations, having a little bit of grace, not creating antagonism, giving people a good acknowledgement. And also just keeping in mind, it's a pretty awesome job that we have. At the end of the day, I did 7 years at the desk. I don't plan to go back to that. Just take a moment to be like, this is a really awesome job that we have. Let's have a good day.
How do you think flight attendants can manage safety when they're working with passengers that want more privacy? That say, hey, I don't need anything. Just kind of leave me alone.
Yeah.
How do you manage a passenger like that where you still want to make sure you're providing as safe of an environment as possible, even with someone that wants to be a little bit more hands off?
Yeah. The good news is because it's such a small space, we can hear stuff, we can smell stuff, right? Because my biggest concern would be if the door was closed and the passengers just wanted no touch for the entire flight, smoke, you know.
They try and make a coffee and
I mean, I wouldn't let them in the galley touching my hot elements, you know what I mean? Unless I kind of showed them how to use it. And I have had flights like that where they've said, hey, we want to be able to make a coffee machine or make a coffee. And I'll be like, great, let me show you the machine so that if I'm with the pilots, you can do it. Yeah. It's kind of a special case. But really, someone like their laptop overheats or they go to light up something in the bathroom, we're going to smell that. We're not going to, even in those cases, stay at the front of the plane the whole time. We just can't because we have the benefit of we need to keep the lavatory tidy. So I go back to the aft lav and I wipe the fingerprints off the mirror and I refold the toilet paper and I clean the sink and I dry the basin and I put out fresh hand towels and I retidy the amenities and all of that. And on my walk back to the bathroom, I can be observant of anything that might be a red flag along the way.
Have you had experiences where you've had to tell people, hey, you can't do that, it's not a safe environment or against the rules?
Yeah, just a couple of times with smoking. Yeah. That's the most challenging one because it's not allowed on Part 135 flights. A lot of people don't know that. Students come through and they're like, you can smoke on these flights? Yeah. Yes. A lot of the companies will say we're a non-smoking airline, which is great because that's your first line of defense. Yep. But, you take a company that maybe has more of a European presence and their passengers come over and they fly on the U.S. fleet and they're used to smoking. Well, how do we handle that now? Yeah. The pilots can still say, this is a non-smoking flight. That includes e-cigarettes. But if you do wish to have a cigarette, please let me know and I can bring you an ashtray. And I just ask that you don't do it in the lavatory. Yeah. So we're kind of setting up those boundaries then.
So smoking's tough on a private jet.
Yeah, it's not fun.
It's so tough.
We got these. I had a flight. Fortunately, it was just a pretty quick flight, but it was on a BBJ, and it was a 26-passenger BBJ. So we were doing Part 125, and we had 26 passengers, and they were all smoking from Van Nuys to Vegas. Fortunately, it was only 45 minutes, but we got the.
Still, that's so much.
It's so much. We got the ashtrays that suck the smoke, but it's kind of like the pumps on the Titanic. Yeah. It slowed it down, but we're still sinking, And sure enough, I mean, we were on the way to Vegas. I was like, okay, it's kind of the mood for it. In those cases, you just have to hope that the company will pay for your dry cleaning. Yeah. That would be a minimum courtesy that I think is nice. And then you're putting out the dryer sheets. You're calling the professional cleaners to come de-smoke the cabin. You're doing everything that you can. But it's definitely not great.
I mean, how long does it take to clean a cabin like that and get rid of that smell?
I mean, you're going to need to have overnight for sure. Yeah. They're going to need to come and professionally clean it. We wouldn't have a morning flight and then same day fly passengers that evening. I mean, technically you could.
I've gotten on airplanes after someone's smoked and it's so clear.
It's so clear. Yeah.
It's so bad.
Yeah.
When you think about kind of a CRM, what do you think? And you talked about communication between, cabin crew and flight crew. What are the keys to really molding a really great team of cabin crew and flight crew to then provide the best experience for the passenger?
Yeah. I think starting with the same goal, which is we're here to make an awesome experience for the passengers. Yeah. have a great day, and then go home and go to sleep and do it tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right? If you start adding in extra stuff, or you start getting into the gossip, or you start getting into the, let's like natter and moan and complain about the company, now your good CRM is tanking, and the onboard experience is tanking. The best flights that I have are with the pilots that are super professional. I'm super professional. We'll joke and have a good time and all of that. But it's like, at the end of the day, we want to do a great flight for the passengers. We can have dinner together or not. No shame in slam clicking. I've become a slam clicker in my later years.
Can you explain what a slam clicker is?
Yes, a slam clicker comes from when you go immediately to the hotel room and you slam click your door shut.
Yeah.
So you basically don't spend any time with your flight crew outside of the required hours during the day.
It's kind of like a slang term, right?
It's totally a slang term. Yeah. And I remember when I was first starting, I was like, I can't be a slam clicker because like I got to hang out with my crew. And I've softened a lot because I'm like, I hang out with my crew during the day, in the sense that we're work buddies and we're taking care of our passengers. But at the end of the day, I want to go home and call my boyfriend and put on a show and do my expense report and go to sleep, so.
Yeah, I know I've talked to a lot of different pilots, and, they definitely have some feelings about how a crew should, mold together. And some people have different experiences. We're like, if we're not going to dinner, then, we're not a good crew. And other ones are like, I've got a life, and I've got to deal with that. This is my job, and
I think you kind of just have to feel it out. It is kind of based on the crew, and I have crews where I know that it's more important for them to spend time together. So I'll go out and do dinners with them a couple of times a week, and I do that. I think from a flight attendant perspective, one of the biggest things that I see that is so easy to do, but people don't do it all the time, is take care of your pilots.
Yeah,
we get into this mindset of like, I have to take care of the passengers. Yes, that's your primary responsibility, of course. But your pilots are your best advocates, especially if you're contracting. If you take good care of your pilots, they're going to be like, hey, we want Amanda to fly again. Let's call her back. And it's very easy. I text them the night before the flight and say, hey, I'm doing my shopping for the passengers tomorrow. Do you guys want anything for lunch?
Yeah.
I'm going to Mendocino Farms. Here's the menu. What can I get you?
Yeah.
And then on the day of the flight, I let them know, hey, flight choreography wise, I think I'm going to be serving the passengers probably around 1. We'll see what they say. Do you want your meal before or after?
Yeah.
And they'll be like, no, I can wait until after. Perfect.
Yeah.
I put it on a tray with, a placemat. I get them cutlery and a bottle of water. I don't go like over the top, and because my focus is on the passengers, but I make it nice for them. I take care of them. If I have, some cookies that I'm making and I have leftovers, I give them some cookies. Just
it's not that difficult.
It's not
right?
that difficult, right? But sometimes people get a little bit into the mindset of, I'm not their mom, I don't need to take care of them. And I'm always like, let me know how that works out for you.
Yeah. Usually not well, right?
No,
it's
no. I'm like, you can do that, but let me know if you ever get invited back for that flight department
just
again.
like any relationship you have with someone. I think if you're putting yourself out and trying to help and provide value to people appreciate that.
It's one of my 3 golden rules for success, really, in any venture, is operating with this 360 help is what I call it. When I'm thinking, how do I help my peers, my seniors, and my juniors? And then additionally, be excellent and don't be an asshole. And you would be surprised how many people just don't do 1, 2, or 3 of those things.
There was something I read about, people that tend to make the most friends and have the best relationships tend to give more than they receive.
100%.
And it doesn't have to be that much more, but if you tend to give more or help more or do anything a little bit more, I know some people look at that as being unfair, but in the end, it's like you're building great relationships and it's like a positive thing.
Yeah. I've never, ever been in a situation where I'm like, God, I wish I helped less.
Yeah.
God, if I only would have just withheld some of my help. I just find, and I even teach this in training as well. I have one day that's the Business Aviation Hospitality Day before the initial training. And a lot of what we talk about is that being of a help mindset.
Yeah.
And, I've made relatively impressive progress in the 7 years that I've been in this industry. And some of that comes from I've just been a dog on the bone in terms of being excellent. I've been nice to people, and I'm always thinking about how do I help people and not how do I help people and what are they going to do for me, just how do I help people.
Yeah.
And then things come back around and that's cool, but I'm not doing it for that reason, you know?
What advice would you give to someone that wants to start as a flight attendant?
Do your research first. It's going to be different depending on where you live, but keep in mind that most places are going to require FACS or flight safety. but most companies are going to require that you have FACS or flight safety current within 12 months. So if you're like, my first step is to go to FACS, keep in mind, the moment I give you your certificate, your 12-month countdown has started. So if you haven't done any research beforehand, you're kind of wasting time. So do your research first. What are the operators in my area? What are the schedules like? Reach out to people on LinkedIn, get in Facebook groups, WhatsApp groups, like gather information. There's so many resources, even on Instagram, YouTube, just free things you can look at. Educate yourself on, is this something that I actually really want to do? And am I prepared for the runway that it's potentially going to take to get into it?
Yep.
And then at that point, sign up for your safety training.
How do you stay inspired, still with flying, and does it ever get old?
It never gets old.
Yeah.
Yeah. I will say that I more so now enjoy the domestic routes than when I was starting off. When I was first starting off, I was like, yeah, I want to go to Europe and I want to do that. Now I'm like, I see a Europe trip and I'm like, whew, that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
That's like a 12-hour flight and that's 2 rounds of catering and then that's international arrival and it's not any extra money, So I'm like, that's a lot. Now I'm like, oh yeah, like let's just go to Phoenix for 4 days and sit. That's great. And I still provide the same experience on board. The flights are all still going to be great, but in those moments when it gets hectic, when it gets chaotic, when you're jet lagged and you're like, don't know what day it is or even what city you're in because it's just been back to back. When you actually do take off and you have that moment to like look out the front of the plane and just see that view, you're like, this is really cool.
What's your favorite airplane to fly on?
I don't know if I can say that. I love them all equally. They're my children, but no. I really enjoy Bombardier.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Globals.
What do you think about it? Like, is it their design or?
I think that it's really intuitively designed for the cabin attendant perspective. Like the galley is really spacious. It's quiet. I do find that it's a bit quieter than the Gulfstreams. I love the Gulfstreams, as well. It's airy. You know,
don't love the Challenger 601s?
The 605 was actually my first favorite plane.
Really?
And if I had to pick, it would be probably like Global 7500 and then Challenger 605.
Yeah.
Because it's only a 2-zone cabin, but in the galley, it's like a little Barbie kitchen. You have everything you need. You have an oven and a microwave, but everything is right there.
Yeah.
So you're so quick with your service because it's just so efficient.
Yeah. You're there. Packs are there. It's
Packs are there. It's right there.
Yeah.
You only have like maximum 8 passengers to take care of, so I can do full formal service and actually have the full experience without having, it gets hard when you have a big plane, just the time of walking back and forth. I think of it like in a restaurant, you have one person that's the host, the chef, the server, the sommelier, the dishwasher, and the janitor.
Yeah.
Right? So you're having to constantly stop one task to start something else. So anytime that I enter the cabin, I have to stop what I'm doing in the galley. So that start, stop slows you down a bit. So if you have more than 8 passengers, no matter how quickly you go, you're still going to be too slow.
And you mentioned like keeping an eye, seeing someone from the galley all the way to the back of a Global 7500, it's tough.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Especially because, they have the doors you can close in between. And
You mentioned a sommelier, and you mentioned something at the beginning about when you're looking at resumes. How would a flight attendant really get that, experience to be all those people like you just went through? That that must be tough. Like you said, when you're hiring, how do you start to gain that experience?
I think a lot of times people have experience that maybe they don't even realize is applicable. Like, have you ever worked in a restaurant?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's hugely applicable.
Yeah.
Have you ever worked in high-end retail?
Yeah.
Have you ever worked, there's a lot of like service-related jobs. If you've been a nanny, have you ever been a babysitter, right? Where you take elements of your past experiences and you look at, how do I make this applicable to the job?
Yeah.
And even without experience, you can weave together a story that shows, okay, I haven't done this yet, but I have all of this background that lends itself to this job. And so I think I can be successful.
What's your favorite place to fly to?
I did a trip one time and we were only on the ground for like less than 24 hours to Montenegro. Have you ever been to Montenegro?
No.
Oh my gosh. they described it as the Croatia that the Americans don't know about.
Oh, really?
I shouldn't have said that because now everyone's going to find out about it.
Yeah.
It was incredible. We literally, we flew, we dropped the passengers off. We got there at like 11 a.m. We had to leave at 9 a.m. the next day. The hotel was like right on the water. We had the jet skis. We had like the old town, the dinner.
I've done flights to Montenegro. Where people pick their yachts up there quite often.
Yeah.
I've done flights where people have either started or ended their yacht trip there, but no one's ever like been like, oh, I want to go to Montenegro to stay.
It's not really like a destination. It's growing. I was looking at some hotels there recently, and there's
but is Montenegro the one that has like one little sliver of beach?
No, that's so Croatia goes like that, and it's Bosnia and Herzegovina that just has the one little spot right there.
Like one little port.
Yeah. I saw that meme where it was like the Bosnians are like, I want to swim, and Croatia's like, no, the beach is Neum. I don't know how you pronounce it. It's Neum. So the Croatians were like, Neum. That's what you get.
What's one item you always keep with you in your flight bag?
Ooh, one item, a lint roller.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that is like my saving grace tool because there's just dust, cashmere particles that get on you. And especially if you're wearing all black, the little lint roll for myself, lint roll the pillows. Like I go through those things so quickly.
What's your favorite luggage?
I'm a Briggs & Riley girl.
Yeah?
Yeah. My dad got me
I just bought my first Briggs & Riley.
Congratulations. Welcome to the family.
Yeah. Garment bag.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got the little it's the carry-on size, but it expands. My dad got it for me when I graduated college, and that was in 2013. So we're going on 12 years of having this thing. Same one.
Wow.
Never had to send it in. But, they have the lifetime warranty.
Yeah,
So I could if I needed to.
What do you think is the most underrated part of the job?
Underrated part of the job.
Obviously, the travel and the destinations and the people.
Yeah.
What do you think is kind of underrated that people talk about?
You know what? That's actually a great question because for me, it's opened my eyes so much to like the level of success that's possible. Where I always had big goals, I had big dreams, but it was capped by my experience. I had seen the level of success that my parents had, their friends had, and that was kind of what I, aspired to achieve. You're flying these people who are amazing from all different backgrounds that have tens, hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars. And it just really opens your eyes to like, wow, like that level of success is possible. And it just like lit this fire in me to like, just do more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you ever get to have good conversations sometimes with the billionaires?
Yeah, occasionally.
Yeah.
There's always a level of separation that we maintain because in this specific environment, we're playing the role of the flight attendant.
Yep.
If I were to run into them on the street, if we were at the same restaurant, we're playing the role of two people at a restaurant, right? But in this environment, you have to understand that they're traveling because they expect a certain level of discretion. It's convenient for them to fly this way. It's not an opportunity for me to go and have like a good conversation with them. But, sometimes they'll show interest in your life and you keep it topical and all of that. And you're genuine. But yeah, I don't end up, getting
drinks with
them
afterwards.
Exactly. Yeah.
If people want to learn more about fax training or maybe want to contact you with help with a flight, what's the best way for someone to contact you?
Yeah, so the easiest thing for me is just jetwithamanda@gmail.com. For fax training, you can just go to Aircare International. I think that's the website now. They just went through a rebranding. So now we have, and Aircare International is the parent company, but there's Aircare Fax, Aircare Telemedicine, and Aircare Staffing are like the three main sections. But
it's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
You got it. That wraps up our conversation with Amanda Piper, a powerful voice in the cabin who's setting the standard for safety, leadership, and professionalism in private aviation. If you took something away from this episode, make sure to subscribe, share it with your team. Special thanks to our two sponsors, Charter Flight Support, the only protection in private aviation that steps in when a mechanical issue happens. And also special thank you to Video Valet, the #1 name in private aviation entertainment. Thanks. I'll see you on the next one.